What's up, everybody? Welcome to GoJo Golic. Mike Golic Jr. Jason Fitz back in for a second day with us here alongside Claudia Bellafato at the DraftKings studio in Boston. We got a great show for everybody. As always, make sure you download, subscribe, rate, and review us. Leave us a 5-star rating and check us out here live Monday through Friday from 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern on the DraftKings Network, our YouTube channel, Samsung TV Plus, Roku, Xumo Play, and all our other great platforms here. Busy one this morning. We've already got NBA news to start the day that Bronny James is sticking around and keeping his name in the draft to go along with everything we saw last night. So, Claudia, what else do we have coming up on the show today?
Well, I'm excited to get the update on your dad and how this road trip is going, which we will get to. But yes, lots of sports news. We're going to start with some NFL stuff, wide open, talking about the wide receiver market heating up. Marshall Newhouse will join the show to talk about the OTA proposals with the NFLPA. And we're going to talk some baseball with Jake Storiale from John Boy. He's going to join the show live. And of course, we have to talk about last night where Minnesota stayed alive against all of the odds, avoided elimination, 105-100 Game 4 win. Anthony Edwards, despite having a great game himself, credited it all to one guy.
Carl, this was obviously a tough start to the series. Just what did you feel? Did you feel any differently out there tonight and being able to knock down the shots, or what came together for you?
Everything came together for him. He was super confident. He wasn't worried about any shots previous to the shots that he hit tonight. He played exceptionally well, and he came through big time. He was the reason we won tonight.
And he did struggle up until this game, so I'm sure he feels a little bit better. I'm sure Minnesota fans still a bit nervous because you're still behind. But he did finish with 25, went 4 for 5 from the three, as he always says, one of the best shooters of the big men. Fitz, they're 4.5-point favorites at home tomorrow, Minnesota is. How do you feel about this series now after that win for them?
Well, look, I don't think we saw anything in this game that wasn't that much different than this series. How many times have we seen the Wolves up late in the game, right? They were, again, and as I kept watching, my first thought was, oh, it'll be interesting to see how they blow this, right? Like, that's just the way this series is gone. But that's where you have to sort of look beyond the fact that this is a 3-1 series and just acknowledge that Minnesota's been in every game. For Cat to have played as well as he did, I think was really encouraging for Minnesota. But this isn't really about it. That was a great part of this game. Mike, to me, this is about the fact that Minnesota finally found a way to keep Luka and Kyrie from going off near the end of the game in a way that they could hang on for dear life. Like, that was the important wall that they broke through. It wasn't Cat. It was proving that you can sustain the last 5 minutes of a game in this series with the lead.
Yeah, to me, this really was about the crunch time and the clutch time numbers that we have been used to from Dallas not showing up in this game, especially from beyond the arc. They just went cold in the time of game where during the regular season, we talked about it, they were one of the best clutch teams in basketball, and during the postseason, especially during this series when games have been close, they had been able to come through and find their way. And so, yeah, for Minnesota, listen, credit to them for fighting. You can't go and make a comeback from being down 3-0 without winning one game at first. You did it on the road, which obviously ups the degree of difficulty. We talked about for Dallas, hey, maybe Derek Lively being out would affect them some. And for the most part, I think we saw from Daniel Gafford and company, they were ready to shoulder the load. Those guys were ready to step up, but a pedestrian offensive performance from Kyrie Irving and then some cold shooting in those waning moments, Jason, because on the other side, Karl Anthony Towns, much better night. Claudia mentioned it, but his shooting numbers coming in to last night's game, he was 15 of 54 for the series, so shooting just under 28%, including 3 for 23 from beyond the three-point arc. And credit to him. Spent the early portion of the game going and driving towards the basket so that late in the game, now all of a sudden he's got a little bit more room on those three-point shots that go down in clutch moments. So I give them credit for that, Jason. Anthony Edwards continues to lead in all the ways that we saw and heard there. But I don't know, does this change the potential outcome of the series at all for you?
No, I don't think so. Look, it's just hard to beat a team 4 straight times. We all know that. Like, I'm not trying to oversimplify here, but let's be real. Like, Minnesota had the chance, as I mentioned earlier, to be in this series in a much different way. It just hasn't fallen right for them. So now they need everything to break right for them for 4 straight games. That just feels like a huge ask. Does it extend the series? Yeah. Is there value in extending the series? Of course, you want to see Minnesota fight for whatever they can fight for. And we love the fact that there's now not a 10-day break before we get to the NBA Finals. But let's be honest here. Like, the thought that Minnesota is going to do that again and again and again, probably not very likely. But that doesn't take anything away from the fact that this series could just as easily be 2-2 right now as it is 3-1. With absolutely nothing would have had to have changed. Just little moments in the last few minutes of the game. So I feel like Minnesota's got to feel good going into the rest of the series. But Mike, it just still feels like it's a massive ask to get 4 straight against somebody at this stage in the playoffs.
I will say nobody has ever done that. So no team in the NBA has ever come back from a 3-0 deficit to win that series. The record's 155-0. Only 4 teams forced to Game 7. So if they're looking at the past, they don't feel so great. Maybe looking forward, they took this monkey off their shoulders. But I don't know if this concerns you guys at all. When I listen to post-game conferences, and this is so different from the Jason Tatums of the world, where even if they get a win, okay, that's fine. It's sort of like Belichick on to Cincinnati. Like, that doesn't matter because we still have 3 more games to win. Where in this post-conference, Kat and Edwards were sort of just joking around, all happy-go-lucky. I don't know which side of that you fall on. I don't know if that's because, Anthony Edwards in general is the voice of this team and he is a younger player at just 22 years old. Is that any of concern to you, GoJo, moving forward?
No, I don't think it's much of a concern until you see that leak into areas it shouldn't. Like, my biggest thing for players, no matter what, and this is true, if you were a guy that needed to goof around and relax a little bit before games to get ready, fine. If you're a guy that needed to listen to death metal and headbutt his locker, good. If you needed to go out and drink on Thursday night and party on Thursday night with the people on Thursday, on college campuses, be my guest as long as you showed up ready to handle your business when it came time for Saturday. And I think the same is here is I want you to be who you are and the best version of you to go and do that. And the one thing with Anthony Edwards is, Jason, he's been consistent in who he's been. And we've seen it show up in all the ways that you want to. We get him mic'd up almost every game now, and you see him imploring his teammates in critical moments there, gassing up Karl Anthony Towns in post-game press conferences every time. And so if the way he goes out, and as he said and was told, I think by Chris Haynes, that he had never been swept so far in his young NBA career in the postseason. And so if the way that he gets to that point is by downplaying the severity of the moment somewhat and treating it a little bit more like any other game, I can understand that. And again, none of what he's done leadership-wise has registered as anything other than quality for me this postseason.
Here's what I don't want to do, Mike. Well, I heard smart people say really stupid things when the Knicks went up 3-2 in that series against the Pacers. And those stupid things had nothing to do with basketball and everything to do with, well, look at the way Indiana was celebrating after their wins. It tells you that they're not tough enough to win a series like this. And all Indiana did was win the next game and then go into the Garden, and we all know what happened there for Game 7. Like, sometimes smart basketball people want to take emotional moments that don't fit into the bubble of what they want and turn that into a storyline. It isn't. Like, young teams are allowed to be young. And that my thing here is that authenticity, something we talked about yesterday with Bill Walton.
Sure.
Like, you've got to be authentic to who you are. So if your locker room is young and fun and light and your leader wants to keep it that way, that can genuinely work for you. And it doesn't have to mean that you don't have whatever it takes to fight your way back into a series, GoJo.
Yeah, and you know what? Part of this can also be something too. It might change. Like, it might change when all of a sudden you've got a different appreciation for how difficult it is to get back to this point and being in a Western Conference final. And maybe that, I don't know that. That's different for every player, because having that attitude when it comes to the way you're trying to calm everyone down before a game or do everything like that is a lot different than not taking the challenge seriously and going out there and failing to execute on the court. Like, Anthony Edwards took the challenge basketball-wise very seriously to attack the basket a lot more, get downhill. We saw the free throw disparity early in this game in the first quarter because Anthony Edwards, anytime he got the ball, was trying to take it to the rack because he knows, hey, I've got to expend max effort because it's do or die at this point. And when I do this, life gets better, not only for me, but for everybody on this team. And so, yeah, the way he displays that might change over time, because we are in range with this team where they're part of that, hey, young enough to not know what they don't know, the thing that we always talk about in the postseason when you get teams going up against veteran outfits who might look at this more the way the Celtics do and say, hey, yeah, you know what? We've been around for this a bunch. We know how perilous this can be, and we also know the ask on us is a lot different, Claudia, than the ask on the Minnesota Timberwolves right now.
So if I'm hearing correctly, you both don't think the way they acted after that last game is any of concern. It sounds like we do believe a little bit in this Minnesota team, and we did heading into it. I'm looking at the odds now. The series total for the games, that's Boston-Dallas, but the series winner for this game, you can get Minnesota at plus 425. We talk about value, where the plus money is at certain parts in the season. Do you see any value here, Fitzy, with Minnesota at plus 425?
This is the thing. This is what happens to everybody. Like, everybody has the one buddy that when you come in the morning, they're like, man, I was one short of getting my parlay. Like, every time I was one short. Like, this feels like that moment where you're like, well, plus 425. Like, that's some good value. I'm going to go ahead and just take that. And you're going to get to Game 7, and then when it doesn't go your way, you're just heartbroken. Like,
oh, wow.
Yeah,
so you think they're getting to Game 7?
I don't know if they get to. I mean, I don't see why not. Like, look, they could get eliminated. This is terrible radio by me or TV by me.
Yeah,
they could get eliminated tomorrow. They could go all the way to Game 7. Every one of these games has come down to the wire. So how can we say that it won't keep coming down to the wire? And if they won one down to the wire, why can't they win another one? So that gets us to Game 6, and then you never know. Do I think that they can win 4 straight? No. And as much as I love plus 425 just almost wants to talk me into it, where I'm like, that's a lot of free cash out of that. It is not free, Mike. I just can't bring myself to do it.
No, it is not. I wouldn't, as Claudia said, no one in NBA history at this stage of the game has come back from down 0-3 to start a series. And so that's good to keep in mind, because could Minnesota extend it? Yes. Do I think they could come back and win it? No. And do I think this will extend beyond Game 5? Probably not, considering for Dallas, this is a classic team that was up 3-0 that took their foot off the gas a little bit, I think, in certain spots. It's difficult to replicate the energy of desperation, and that's what Minnesota had on their side. You heard it was the unstoppable force meets immovable object, right? Anthony Edwards saying, I have never been swept, according to, Chris Haynes, who texted him. And on the other side, you had Kyrie Irving, who took his first loss ever in his postseason career in an elimination game. He had been 14-0 in that point, and now notches his first loss as a part of that group. And so I just think when you're dealing with almost absolutes like that, it's probably not smart money to go.
But Mike, I need this, Mike. I need this, though. Think about the drama, all right? Think about Kyrie and Luka blowing a 3-0 lead while Anthony Edwards comes back from a 3-0 deficit. Like, for a world where I just want, like, big dramatic soap opera takes for the next week, this would everybody be blowing up. There will be absolutely no nuance in any conversation. Mike, I want this.
It would be, because you're right. The nuance in the conversation, unfortunately, took a hit last night when Karl Anthony Towns actually had a pretty good game. And it did not look like it was trending that way. 5 points in the first half and a bunch of really bad fouls that he had, which unfortunately has become the Karl-Anthony Towns experience, is bad and poorly timed fouls that gets him into trouble. Him and Gobert both, quite honestly, spent the majority of last night in a decent amount of foul trouble. But in the second half, 20 points, being able to come back into the fourth quarter. I think he subbed back in with like 9 minutes left and didn't foul out till there was about a minute and a half left. And so was able to show some restraint when it mattered the most down the stretch for this team. Fitz, I'm sure that went a long way in how we're going to discuss him heading into this offseason. And should he put at least one more good game on tape, I think it could mitigate some of what's happened to both of the Minnesota bigs, where we've seen, I think Kendrick Perkins came out and said that Rudy Gobert has diminished the honor of the Defensive Player of the Year. And certainly we were all getting ready. I saw the conversation starting yesterday of, does Minnesota need to go out in the offseason and get Anthony Edwards an even better complementary piece, or will Karl-Anthony Towns be enough? I don't know if you have a different opinion on that at all. It seems like they've got their core, and at this point you're going to need something, because asking Karl-Anthony Towns to be the true number 2 superstar in a tandem with Anthony Edwards, I think is just outside of his ability at this point.
You're right, and I agree with all of that. I also think we're seeing this just swell of support for Anthony Edwards we talked about yesterday. It's become this whole conversation around the playoffs. And now, because we have blown up Anthony Edwards, rightfully so, for the most part, because we've blown him up, now all of a sudden it's like, well, he's got to have more. He's got to have more. He's got to have more. Like, how long is it going to take before there's then the inevitable, if Minnesota doesn't give him more, Anthony Edwards is going to want to leave? Like, we've gone full roller coaster superstar with Anthony Edwards. So now it's, well, these guys aren't good enough. They're going to have to go get more. Let's not forget that it wasn't that long ago that it was, man, this young Minnesota team seems like they're a little ahead of schedule. Like, we blew through ahead of schedule in one round of the playoffs. That's how good this round has been. So now Minnesota, and that speaks to what Claudia mentioned earlier. Like, the Celtics are coming in very like on to Cincinnati sort of move. Well, of course, because when you are doing this the first time, it should be more fun. Like, Mike, the first time you ever hosted a TV show was a lot more fun than when you do it all the time now. Like, it's not that you don't love it. It's just, it hits different. The first night I slept on a tour bus was different than the 1,000th night I slept on a tour bus. Like, these are normal things. But because Anthony Edwards and this group is in this ascension in this first time, they're having fun. We're blowing it up. We're making Anthony Edwards basically a basketball god. And now we are absolutely, if Cat plays poorly in the next game, it will be, they got to find somebody better. Like, it is the overreaction of the Timberwolves as part of NBA culture moving forward until otherwise noted.
It will be the overreaction, and I know we're going to get the MJ comparisons again if they do end up winning even just this next game and don't take the series, and if it is because of Anthony Edwards. But I think that conversation will come into play, because I'm looking right now, Luka and Kyrie outscored Ant and Cat by a combined 70 points in those first 3 wins. And then the difference was 10, of course, favoring Minnesota side, but that is going to be the conversation. Anthony Edwards is going to need help. That's the reason the Celtics have been so successful. We talked about it. Brown's okay with giving up some points so Tatum can go off and, roles reversed. And if Cat can't show up and he's going to talk a big game, and he does have some big games with a double-double, big on the boards, big on the points, but not quite to the level that Kyrie and Luka Doncic have had. So I'm curious to see if that is the same moving forward. I have a feeling it's going to be more like the first 3, though, GoJo.
Yeah, I would agree. I think water finds its level, and that tandem for Dallas is a better group overall. And you're right, Karl-Anthony Towns, very good player. But if we're asking, hey, can he be the absolute best number 2 consistently in these critical moments for Anthony Edwards going forward, for a guy in Ant Edwards who we think has that continued superstar trajectory, my thought process is probably no, is we've probably seen as close to the top of Karl as we're going to get, and Anthony Edwards deserves a lot of credit for that, because the reason we love Anthony Edwards so much is he gets up and says stuff like this in post-game press conferences. To Claudia's point about being frivolous in the post-game and acting like this is no big deal, this last night was the reminder and the little hit of the good stuff from Anthony Edwards of why I can't quit this dude.
Y'all got any questions for Mike? Y'all want to ask me about Mike? Nobody want to ask me about Mike? Bye.
How about Mike, especially in the first half? It seemed like he really
is old as and he was getting downhill, laying the ball up. So shout out to Bite, and he coming in here with these clown pants on. So y'all about to see him in a minute. But that's my OG. That's my point guard. He played great tonight, and I couldn't ask nothing more from him. So thank you, Mike Conley.
Like we talk about that, the feeling of youth or whatever, however we phrased it before with this guy. There is something to be said, Claudia, for in key moments having a great player calm everybody down a little bit, like break the tension in the room. You're thinking and spending so much time and bandwidth on trying to get all this stuff right that every once in a while having the guy that is going to carry us out on the court also be the dude that's going to lighten the mood and say something to just get everyone out of their head a little bit. Over the course of a long season, you need a guy like that. And it's usually a role player. Like I was usually the comic relief guy at different points on teams as someone that was near the, closer to the end of the bench than he was to the front of the pack. But to have your best player also be that guy Fitz, I think is a pretty cool thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, Mike, that's the right way you call somebody old. See, like that, when you reference my age, that's the way you do it. With a little bit of respect to like still doing the thing, that's the right way to do it. But you're 100% right. Teams reflect leadership top down. And maybe in this moment, instead of getting tight in these games, this is exactly what they need. All I care about is Minnesota stay true to themselves. And that is obviously what they're doing.
They are definitely staying true to themselves. And Fitzy, you are definitely staying true to yourself, looking like a vampire who somehow manages to be able to walk out into the sun during days and explore your time in the light. So we love that for you, you old, decrepit man. Coming up next, though, speaking of old men, we'll check in on the status of my father, who is somewhere traversing this great nation, munching on Buc-ee's, trying to get himself home, and find out if the Minnesota Timberwolves have more in store this NBA postseason. Next time, GoJo Golic.
on GoJo and Golic with an update because Senior's not here. He's actually on a road trip. They're going from Scottsdale back to South Bend. And yesterday, we got the picture of them at Buc-ee's, and our awesome team put this together of him. As you can see, if you're not watching on DKN, it's a map of Senior going across the world to Buc-ee's.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, wasn't that good? They did well
Dad can
with that.
fly now. That's the one thing that we've learned. And so as he's gone through in his travels, that's something he's added to the bag. But yeah, him and Mom have been enjoying the road trip. I don't know if the three dogs, Hank, Harry, and Ted, that are with him have enjoyed it nearly as much from the updates that I've seen. But either way, they've got to be in the home stretch here soon, hopefully, which means we will have Dad back on the airways tomorrow. In the meantime, our buddy Jason Fitz has been helping us out here. And I got to say, all you jackals online, we put up this poll asking who you guys would rather road trip with. And Claudia, I wasn't prepared for the stray that I caught this morning from you, quote tweeting this, asking, does anyone love Mike Golic Jr.? The answer is about 35% of the 943 people that have voted. I just finally retweeted it. I hadn't seen this yesterday.
Oh.
And so I have a feeling now the portion of the timeline that sides with me will rise up and right this egregious wrong.
That's why. No, that's why, Fitz, isn't it? He just didn't retweet it.
Is it really an egregious wrong though? I mean, and like, let's face it, most of your followers like your dad better. I don't think the numbers are going to help you, Mike. I think at the end of the day, you know, you'll always be Bronny and he'll always be LeBron.
Ooh, I think, GoJo,
Listen.
you just hurt yourself by saying you want to listen to Taylor Swift. I just feel like that is probably.
No, I'd be in on this.
what?
I'm in on the Tay-Tay. Like, we can listen to the Tay-Tay. That's fine. I'm good with the Tay-Tay.
I'm wrong.
All right, Jason Fitz, good with the Tay-Tay. Make that the headline for today on GoJo and Golic. Fitz, you tried to slander me using Bronny, who seems like a delightful young man. And let's talk about him because he made the news this morning, and anytime the James family is in the news, boy, oh boy, we are all going to talk about it. But this was the deadline coming up. It was 11:59 p.m. Eastern on Wednesday. So today is the deadline for when you can decide to withdraw from the NBA draft and head back to college. And Rich Paul, the CEO of Clutch Sports, who represents LeBron James Sr. amongst a host of other NBA stars, and now LeBron James Jr., has said Bronny is staying in the NBA draft going for and foregoing his college eligibility. Fitz, any part of this surprise you?
No, not at all. I think it does tell you that there has to be some assurance they feel like he's going to land somewhere, but that doesn't surprise any of us, right? Like, we can sit here, and I will say this as a human, like, there's been so much said about Bronny and whether or not he should be drafted. And a lot of it seems like it really attacks his character in some ways. I don't understand that. Like, if the kid has the opportunity to get drafted, no matter why he's there, why hate on it? Like, if I was a kid that suddenly had the opportunity to be drafted in the NBA, I would take that opportunity. So I think a lot of people are sort of displacing how they feel about the whole situation to Bronny directly. Obviously, they've done the work. They've done the look. They feel like he's going to land somewhere. He wants to play in the NBA. Who can fault him for putting himself in the draft system if they have assurances, which I believe they must, that he's going to get drafted?
I think the point that stood out for me was that Rich Paul said that he wouldn't be doing it two-way. They said they don't necessarily, they're not worried about where he lands, but just the fact that they're not going to do two-way so that he couldn't go from, the farm league system up to the NBA. That part doesn't really make sense to me because the whole reason he was debating going into the NBA or staying is he didn't even play a full season at USC. And of course, the numbers didn't support. And I get that. That's tough to come cold off the bench, especially coming off of something scary like he had with a heart complication. But you would think as a player, you would want to have that room for development so that if you want to play in the NBA, you could get better not being in that spotlight because the 1 minute he may get off the bench, everybody's going to judge him off of that 1 minute, GoJo.
Yeah, so, and for anyone that's unfamiliar with the structure of a two-way contract, because we don't talk about this a ton because the player's usually not Bronny James, is you get, in addition to the 15 regular roster spots, two-way deals allow a player with limited, you can go up to the NBA for 45 days on an NBA roster with the salary that you're signed at there, with the rest of the season spent in the G League. This is often for second round and undrafted guys going in and trying to make their way into the league. And Claudia, Rich Paul cited the development plan there, which is kind of an interesting thing to me. And I don't know if I 100% buy that. Now, listen, him and LeBron James know the landscape of the NBA far better than I do. And if they truly believe, hey, him being up with the big roster and practicing with them every day and being around that environment is going to be better for his basketball development, then I'll have to side with them on that. But in general, the history of sport is usually gone all the way back to the truth of, to get better at the sport, you got to play more of the sport. And for Bronny, to Claudia's point, we've obviously seen him in high school, but at SC last year, he just didn't get to play as much for a variety of reasons and only has that 1 year of experience. So you would think getting out there in more game situations would probably have more value than sitting on the bench potentially for the majority of a season.
Yeah, I agree with that. But I also think that at some point, LeBron and Rich Paul are probably looking around saying, I don't want you playing games with my kid. I don't want you drafting him to go up and down because you think it gives some opportunity that I'm going to come play for your franchise or whatever it is, or you just want the name Bronny in your system. I want somebody to draft him that's truly committed to him. And, I can see that being part of the logic. And as far as Bronny's concerned, we don't really know what his end goal is. Like we hear so much about Bronny, but we rarely hear from Bronny on all of this. If his end goal is to get in the league in time to play with his dad, if that matters as much to him as it matters to his dad, you don't want to be in a two-way system, because the two-way system could put you in a situation where you don't even get the opportunity, whether it's playing against him or with him, to be on the floor when your dad is playing. So like, if that is part of the true life goal for him, maybe they're just looking at it. Maybe part of their whole conversation in deciding to stay in the draft was as simple as, if we're going to declare, then I want to make sure, A, somebody's not playing games. B, we really have a shot for Dad and I to do something historic. Let's make sure that there's no two-way deal involved. Like, that's the altruistic way to look at it in my mind.
And to your point, that's why the Lakers are the favorite at the DraftKings Sportsbook to land him. There is a whole Bronny James market. So they're the favorite at plus 180. The Suns are second at 10-1. And then they also have his draft position. 39.5 is the line set. So they're expecting him at 40 because the over is juiced to minus 160. So interesting that we actually have markets we could bet on. I don't know if either of you would want to touch this. I, for one, do not, because this whole situation seems a little bit murky to me. And with the power that LeBron James does have, if he wants him to be on the Lakers, I feel like GoJo, he'll probably go to the Lakers.
Yeah, I let's put it this way. I think there's a pretty strong chance it works out the way that they all want it to. At the same time, I don't want to give LeBron James too much mastermind credit, because I feel like we do that from time to time where we overreach on what we believe he is doing as a puppet master of his team or the league in general. But what I will say, and I think Fitz's point was a good one, is LeBron and Rich Paul know the landscape really well, and I'm sure are hyper aware of what the best opportunity for him is going to look like, at least in their mind. But Fitz does bring up the central thesis, which is, it's got to be, what is this about? Like, the nepotism point that comes up with a lot of this that bothers a lot of people is obviously something I'm incredibly familiar with. And as I've always said, is if you're someone who truly loves what you're getting ready to do, and this is something you want to make your life and your vocation, like, hey, however the opportunity comes, you got to take it, and then you got to make something of it, and you got to run with it, and that'll be reflected in how it looks from then on out. If the goal is just to go and try and play with LeBron James Sr. for the time that he's in the league, then so be it. That's a different goal, and you'll clearly go about it in a different way. And that's why this decision about the G League, as minor as it seems, is something that still registers interestingly on the radar for me, Fitz.
But here's my biggest question. If the Lakers, to Claudia's point, are the place he lands, what are they doing? Like, the Lakers are not closer to winning a championship with LeBron coming back next year than they were this year. They're not closer to winning a championship when they bring Bronny in, if that's the way it goes. Like, the Lakers, I know, have always treated stars incredibly well, but the Lakers have always been about championships. Somebody explained to me how this entire strategy with Bronny or LeBron gets the Lakers any close to the actual goal of lifting the Larry O'Brien trophy, because none of it makes sense to me.
Fitz, you got to think of this like a buffet. The Lakers have a chance to add a big main menu item on the buffet plate this summer. They've got the ability in that spot open there. This is like a garnish on the plate where you're going to get him in the second rounder as an undrafted free agent. This is a little bit of a side dish that you're adding on here to make everybody else feel better about the plate overall when they sit down at the table. God, I'm hungry.
on GoJo and Golic to talk some football. OTAs, of course, ramped up, which makes media and fans excited because we finally have some football to talk about. Possibly some changes coming to the NFL schedule in the offseason. We'll be joined by Marshall Newhouse, former offensive lineman, to break that down. But for now, we're going to play a little game, guys, called Something, Nothing, or Everything, starting with receiver Nico Collins signed an extension with the Texans, 3 years, over $72 million. So, of course, it's everything for him. But I want to know, what about the receiver market looking out for a new deal? Something, nothing, or everything, GoJo?
So I'll say something, but less for the receiver market and more for the Texans, just because this to me is another indication of the great place that their roster's in heading into the season. Fitz, Nico Collins had a career year last year in no small part due to the fact that CJ Stroud is now his quarterback. Bobby Slowick is now his offensive coordinator, and this thing is moving in the right direction. And so to get a player like that who is ascending, who is going to still be playing his best football, is only 25 years old right now, laid out in front of him, this deal puts him at about 7th in average annual value for the wide receiver market right now. So not a market-setting deal. You secure another great young player alongside Tank Dell, who should be back healthy, in an offense who's only going to keep growing around one of the best young quarterbacks in the sport.
Yeah, and I think there's something also to just showing the entire locker room, hey, we're going to reward the guys that need to be rewarded, and we're not going to make it a pain in the butt. You know, that's real. And so in my mind, coming in and doing this contract in a way that doesn't reset the market, but still handsomely pays, it reminds everybody that, by the way, if you're one of those fans, your favorite team drafted one of the myriad of wide receivers this year that were taken in the draft, just start the clock. Better start getting the most out of them, because in 4 years, you are going to have to pay that person very, very handsomely. Wide receivers, edge rushers, quarterbacks, they're all just going to wreck your salary cap. So just get ready for it. I think there's something.
Absolutely. He's a 3rd-round pick, so heading into the last year of that rookie deal and them deciding, hey, we're going to go ahead and get this done now, to your point, Fitz, sends a good message to the rest of the locker room as well that, hey, this is a place that's going to reward the kind of production. And we're going to get out ahead of it. That's the good financial planning that we see from smart teams like the Philadelphia Eagles, as opposed to teams like the Dallas Cowboys, who have been dragging their feet for a while and put themselves in some perilous situations. Claudia, what do we got coming up next year?
2 other receivers looking to get paid. T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, both missing from Bengals OTAs as they're looking for new deals. Remember, Higgins is tagged, Chase in the extension window. So, Fitz, we'll go to you first on this one. Something, nothing, or everything with them skipping out?
It's absolutely everything. This year for the Bengals has heaping amounts of pressure on it in my mind, because we have anointed Joe Burrow as the one that can take down Patrick Mahomes without ever acknowledging that at some point Joe Burrow is also injury prone. We don't like to say that for whatever reason with Burrow. But when you start putting into what is on the line this season for the Bengals, you can't tell me it means nothing. And I understand that they kept people from within the system, but it is still a new offensive coordinator. I understand we want to say Zach Taylor is the one that's really in charge of the offense, but there is going to be some nuance and new to it. But above and beyond all of it, it just speaks to the fact that coming into this season, the Bengals have got to figure this out somehow, some way. And the Eagles, who Mike just mentioned, had planned so incredibly well, they were able to pay their quarterback and pay a couple of wide receivers. So even if the Bengals go into the negotiating room and say, sorry, man, we paid Burrow, the agents for Higgins and Chase are going to say, I don't give a damn who else you paid. I want my guy to get paid. This isn't going to go away. This is just going to be a bigger and bigger story throughout the course of the entire year. I think it's absolutely huge, Mike. It's huge.
Did you use a Chicago accent when you were talking about Joe Burrow there? What was that?
No, that was just me. That was just me waxing. I can't do accents.
We talk about it was like Mel Kiper Jr. from Chicago. When we talk about a guy like Joe Burrow, no, maybe that's John Gruden now. I don't know anymore. Either way, I actually think, Fitz, this does underscore the pressure that's on the Bengals this season. So I can understand where you're coming from. But as far as an offseason headline, this is nothing. Like, Jamar Chase is getting ready to sign a massive new contract, so I can understand him not wanting to go on the field right now and risk anything, any sort of freak injury in the middle of these practices in the offseason that they're going through. And then for T. Higgins, this is kind of what happens with guys that are on the franchise tag. And I believe he's the last dude. Most of everyone else on the franchise tag had already signed long-term extensions this offseason. We kind of know where T. Higgins and the organization stand. He hasn't signed his franchise tender, and so for everyone out there, that's the difference when we see players potentially hold out and guys in training camp that'll soon get fined for doing this because this CBA punishes them. For the franchise tag guys, as long as you don't sign that tender, you can stay away and you won't be fined a dime because you're not technically on your deal right now with them. So he can hold out all throughout camp. He can send the message that he wants to this team. And then we see these guys usually show up because actually missing games is usually a bridge too far. And so, no, I think T. Higgins, they knew was probably going to be away for most of the offseason because of this, and it's fine. And then as soon as Jamar Chase signs on the dotted line, he'll be there. This all seems to be stuff that Cincinnati has planned on right now. I'm not saying it's necessarily good practice, but this is stuff that they've accounted for in the way that they're going about this.
Mike, I want even treatment on this. That's all I'm saying, because if I believe there's no team in the NFL this year, none in the NFL that has more pressure to win right now than the Bengals, because they have gone all in on this is the way we're
100%.
going to do it. So all I'm saying is that if it was the Dallas Cowboys and their two best wide receivers were both no show, not coming in anywhere till they got paid, we would be losing our damn minds across every single platform. All I'm doing is holding the Bengals to the same standard, because I don't care about the logo on the side of the head. I care about what the real pressure looks like. There is more pressure on the Bengals to win right now than there is on the Cowboys to do it, because the Bengals have gone all in on this moment, right? They've got to be able to put it together. So I'm keeping the same standard for Cincinnati that I would for the Dallas Cowboys, which you, good sir, are not. You're a fraud. That's basically what we decided. You're a fraud.
I think that's less standards and more just letting brainworms seep in. Like, if we said we should treat everything in our life the way that we treat the Cowboys, we would all be running around like meth heads looting grocery stores, and that's probably not good for society. You're
the one that taught me. You're the one that taught me the footballism. The way you do anything is how you do everything. Like, you're the one that gave that. Like, look, I'm just holding the same standard, man.
My God. All right. You know what? Speaking of doing something, Claudia, let's move on to the next topic here. What do we got?
I have to say, Fitzy was most convincing on that one, so I might be with him there. Also, something that Fitz can relate to, losing weight. He's trying to get his abs, in case nobody knew. He's on a strict diet. So is Lamar Jackson, apparently, and Tua over in Miami. They said, this is what Lamar Jackson said. I don't really know how many pounds I lost. I'm like 2-something pounds right now, but I'll say it was important enough to be able to move around a little bit extra. That's all. Gojo, we all know once you lose a few pounds, even if you lose 5, you do feel a little bit lighter on your feet. I have never played quarterback, so I don't know. But I'm sure even as a football player online, you can speak to this. So is this a big deal? Is this something, nothing, or everything, these two quarterbacks losing some weight?
I think it's different for both of these guys. Obviously, Tua's weight became a subject last year in a way that bordered on a little bit inappropriate at points. But I'd say in general, you want to find the weight you're comfortable at. And for everyone, that takes a little while making that jump to the pros. For Lamar Jackson, it's more interesting because he's obviously a quarterback we associate with taking off more, being at risk of more hits, and putting on some of the weight we saw the last couple seasons, Jason, we saw all as a response to, hey, Lamar Jackson had been injured a little bit. Maybe he needs to be able to take more of the hits inside the pocket where he wants to live. But Lamar Jackson, since he came into the league, has been one of the best quarterbacks in terms of avoiding hits, especially in the open field when he takes off. And so if he wants to get a little bit of that explosiveness back, sacrificing some of that padding, I do think he's well positioned to do that because of how he plays the game and how aware he is of taking hits.
Yeah, I think there is something too also to knowing how your body feels at the end of the season. Now, I think it's funny to me how sometimes we look at draft prospects and say, well, he's undersized or he's too big. We don't apply the same logic to guys coming into the league. But once you've been in the league for a few years, to me, at the end of the year, you know how your body feels. And if your body feels like it can't take it or you want to put on or lose weight, I support that entirely. It will be interesting, though, because we do freak out the first time there's some issue and somebody is either put on or lost a lot of weight.
Yeah, for Tua, I think overall less impactful. Again, he's a guy that's not defined by his mobility. It's more of what he can do from the pocket, getting the ball out of his hands quick there. That to me is just more of a comfort and protection thing for him as well, because that offensive line we know has struggled at times to protect him, even with the scheme that aids them in doing that so much down there under Mike McDaniel. And so the bottom line is you find out that comfort level as you go along in the league, and both of these guys now veteran enough to where we're going to trust what they want with their bodies. You'll trust us with the all-weekend team. A little late. Coming up next here on GoJo Golic.
late than never. Yes, it's Wednesday. We usually do this on a Monday, but that's okay because there's plenty of stories that you may have missed, whether it's players or a game or just a storyline. I want to hear the best of the best. Your all-weekend team, GoJo.
Yes, the all-weekend team. You know, we all had that kind of realization this morning where coming off a long weekend, you forget how short the rest of the week is. Now it's already Wednesday, folks. Celebrate good times. We are inches closer to the weekend than we expected, but that also cuts both ways. It means coming off the long weekend, we have to get to this now. So our honorable mention, second team and first team performers from an incredibly long weekend in the world of sports. And Fitz, wanted to start off honorable mention on a little bit more serious note, just because of something that we saw unfortunately rock the world of golf this weekend with the tragic passing of PGA Tour player Grayson Murray that we saw so many players reacting to over the weekend, guys shedding tears, talking about someone that they had all been around, known, been close with in their various ways. But I saw a very small bright spot in the midst of all this from Harry Higgs, who was a golfer on the Korn Ferry Tour, who won at the Knoxville Open this weekend and took the time in receiving the trophy at the end of that tournament to kind of issue a challenge to everybody in honor of Grayson Murray. Here's what he had to say.
I would challenge everybody here, and I'm going to do this myself as well, each day, say something nice to someone you love, and also make it a point to say something nice to somebody you do not even know. The world is a very difficult place. Thank you.
And it fits, you know, this in light of Grayson Murray, who'd been very public with his battles and struggles with mental health and things that people had seen from him over the years. He had been outspoken on and unfortunately, you know, couldn't fully get away from. And so it's a reminder that as we talk more and more about mental health, to not just let those be two words that cover some broad spectrum. These are real struggles that people are going through that we often have no idea about. And so to check in on people and offer some levity and brightness where you can go a long way.
Yeah, I mean, this is a check-in on your friends moment, and I'll double down on what you said. Like, you know, it's funny. Mike and I actually have a group text with a bunch of buddies, and one of the things that's always impressed me about that group is like the amount of times you're just checking in to make sure everybody's good. And I think we all need that reminder. That is a beautiful, honorable mention for you. I'll lighten us up a little bit, have a little bit of fun. But Arizona beating USC to end the Pac-12, not just ending the Pac-12 baseball game, they win in a walk-off. And what I loved about it, Mike, was like the drama and the ending. It feels like the Pac-12, as it has come to an end, as we know it right now, has given us drama at every step, whether it was from football now to baseball. Through each step of the ending of it, it's been done with a bit of a tip of the cap moment. So I thought it was fitting for a league that has meant so much to so many people to end in that capacity. Just felt like the right thing to happen in that moment for Pac-12 and Pac-12 fanatics everywhere, who, by the way, are still out there and very passionate about the conference that they love that is no longer going to be.
No, absolutely. We talked about this some yesterday with the passing of Bill Walton, but the Conference of Champions that I think for so many people will live on in a number of ways that we probably won't even see yet. It's weird. We're getting ready to go through conference media days now where we're seeing all of these teams, you know, Texas and Oklahoma right now down in Destin at SEC media days. And when everything continues to progress with the Big Ten, with teams like USC and UCLA that all launched this, that you'll still have those people holding on to something that was objectively great for a long time and just grossly mismanaged by the people that we put in charge of it, which what else is new in college athletics? But I digress. Let's get to the second teamers, Fitz. I talked so much about Notre Dame lacrosse yesterday, but I wanted to give a little bit of love to one of the guys that crossed over on the football side of things. We mentioned there were a few players, most notably led by Jordan Faison, the Notre Dame wide receiver, who was the MVP of the Sun Bowl this year for that team, that went on to star for the lacrosse team, was a first-line midfielder that had a great season for them. But Tyler Buckner, the former Notre Dame football quarterback, who, looking at his timeline, was the MVP of the 2022 Gator Bowl as a quarterback coming off the bench that season after injury, then transferred to Alabama, was a member of the 2024 Rose Bowl team down there following former offensive coordinator Tommy Rees, then transferred back to play lacrosse at Notre Dame, a sport that he'd been recruited to play out of high school, carved out a really strong role for himself as a defensive midfielder on that team, and now is a 2024 lacrosse national champion, who I believe has an extra year of eligibility. So one of the most unique college careers I can remember, and a guy who worked hard to get to a great spot now.
Can we also acknowledge that this show in the last 48 hours has talked more lacrosse than most national media outlets will talk Stanley Cup final. Like, that's just real. I am just real. The lacrosse love has been all over the place for you. I'm happy for you, Mike, because you're a day further removed from being a national champion, two-time fan. Does it feel any different today? You're still on one?
No, it feels fantastic. And you're concerning the national media, shout out to Pat McAfee for continuing to platform the boys. I saw Pat and Chris Kavanaugh both on there yesterday with the championship trophy. It's a great way to keep growing the game, spreading the love. So happy to see it for everybody. And no, Fitz, I'm still kind of drunk. Life is great.
I appreciate that. I spent a lot of money on Vegas Golden Knights Stanley Cup champion gear, so I get you. Okay, so I'll give you my second team here. And it's because I love it when somebody looks around and says, man, I got to better myself if I want to keep doing what I do. Vita Vea has dropped a ton of weight this offseason. They're talking about his workouts he's been doing with Ndamukong, and he's been trying to get himself all lean and fit. Coaches have noticed the difference, Mike. I think when you've been playing, we talked earlier about Lamar's weight. I think when you've been playing a long time and you're a defensive lineman, you constantly have to analyze, hey, how do I keep doing it at this stage in my career the best way? And it's easy for guys that play in the middle of the line, I think, to especially balloon out as they go through their careers. You've talked for years about how offensive linemen, when they stop playing, either just let themselves go or suddenly a few months later, they are a beacon of light in a dark, dark world and they look like supermodels. I love Vita Vea basically taking control of this and saying, I'm going to work with somebody I know that I've played with, that's a teammate, and I'm going to get the best version of myself for somebody that's been as good as he has. I wonder if we're going to get a big season out of it. I love taking that commitment and using this off time instead of just resting your body to make himself even better.
Yeah, I remember talking to Joe Thomas about this for Pablo Torre Finds Out when we talked about the O-line weight loss phenomenon. And Joe said later in his career, his body ended up becoming different. Nick Hardwick said similar things about, hey, your body can't take the same pounding when you're 29, 30, 31 years old as it did in your early 20s. Vita is now just south of 30. And a guy who's been the category of player I always say, nothing this big should move this fast. That's always been Vita. And so now him learning how to take care of his body in a different way, very cool stuff. Let's get to number one. Fitz, the first team all weekend. Got to go with Charles Leclerc, right? The Ferrari driver goes to his homeland. So he is the Monaco Grand Prix was this last weekend. Charles Leclerc was born and raised in the Principality of Monaco and got the chance to swan dive into the beautiful waters out there after going out in a race that I know people don't love the track, and I know it's not the most exciting race on the circuit there. It's more about the pomp and circumstance surrounding it. But hey, come on, the hometown kid winning on a big stage like that in a world that's been so dominated by Max Verstappen. I'll tip the cap to that any day and twice on, I guess, Wednesday now.
I love the fact that we both went first overall with racing, because I don't picture either of us being in that. Like, look, I'm not gonna lie to anybody. Like, I'm not a big Indy guy. Like, the Indy 500 isn't something that I'm usually flocking to. But I was around some buddies, and some of them were getting drunk while they were watching the race. And at the end, I hear Kyle Larson's name, and I look over and I'm like, wait, what? Like, that doesn't. And then they're interviewing him, and he's talking about the fact that he's catching a private jet. Yes, because he tried to pull 2 races in one day. He finished the Indy 500, and then he takes a private jet over to the Charlotte Motor Speedway to try and race for NASCAR that night. Unfortunately, rain got in the way of everything and made it an absolutely cluster. You know what? He couldn't get through. He didn't get to race 2, but just the fact that he was ready to do it, Mike, come on, like that. You try and race twice in a day, you get my overall prize.
100% Fitz. And this is for, we've had these conversations before, you and I, about what people consider a sport. And everyone always tried to come for the racing sports. Like, man, we had this conversation with Bubba Wallace when he was on the show a while back about putting athletes from other sports behind the wheels of these cars and asking them to go darn near 200 miles an hour around the track all day. Most of us would piss down the side of our legs with an effort to do that. So to try and put yourself through that twice in one day, potentially, that kind of stress and force, hell no, not for me, not for the faint of heart. So you get my respect for that.
By the way, like, think about how you have one bad traffic day in LA. You get home and you're like, I need a drink. My nerves are fried. Everybody was all over the road. Now imagine getting through a whole race and then you're like, all right, I'll run it back.
I was driving in my back seat, tailing me the whole way home. This is hell. Congratulations to everybody who made the prestigious all-weekend team. Coming up next, a guy we always love having on our team, Marshall Newhouse, going to stop by and talk about the future of the NFL offseason and how drastically it may change soon. Next. Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr. Jason Fitz filling in for my dad, Mike Golic Sr., who should be touching down in South Bend any moment, ending the great road trip across the 50 states. Claudia Bellafato holding it down for us in the studio in Boston. And now we're delighted to be joined and added to the group here with former NFL offensive tackle Marshall Newhouse, kind enough to join us now here on the show. Marshall, good morning, man. What's going on, brother?
Yeah, I'm doing well, man. Good morning to you fellas.
Good morning, man. And Marshall, we got a lot we want to talk to you about today. You know, we're getting into potentially that dead period coming up. Well, first I want to start with, obviously, you're a guy that I've seen, you know, rooting for plenty of Dallas area sports teams here, but Mavs give one back last night here. How is the state of Mavs fandom here coming off of the first game they've finally given up? Kyrie Irving's first loss in an elimination game. You feeling good?
No, I'm feeling okay. It was an interesting game. You saw Kyrie not play too well. Luka wasn't too efficient. And you saw Cat kind of have a light bulb go off. So you're like, oh, okay. But at the end of the day, this team is built for closeout moments. The game was within one possession at the end, and that's all you can ask for. So I feel like they're going to figure this out. Game 5. But every game that Cat and Ant get under their belt is another little bit of confidence. So you're trying to put them out of the misery before it gets really weird.
Are you actually, though? So this comes to my debate yesterday, because I feel like Celtics fans are just so woe is me. They're not really enjoying this run. Are you enjoying this run to try and get to the final, or are you just sitting there worried about what happens next?
Of course I'm enjoying this. Boston fans can be the most miserable lot you've ever seen. They've got a historically great team, and they're figuring out ways to not enjoy it, which is wild to me. We weren't supposed to be here. The trade at the trade deadline for Gafford and PJ Washington and the retooling of his team. Not many people saw this coming. I figured we would be a contender. I figured Luke and Kyrie would figure it out. But this road, beating Oklahoma City and LA on the way, and hopefully Minnesota, was not something I had in the cards. And so if we can finish this off, it would be a historic run.
You mentioned Kyrie and Luka figuring it out. I do feel like we're kind of brushing that aside as something that's a little more expected. The version of Kyrie that we had for so long versus the version that you guys now appear to have here in Dallas. What do you attribute that to, this big change that we've seen in the way that he's carried himself, especially off the court recently?
Yeah, listen, he's always had the potential on the court, but the leadership part is something that we just hadn't got a chance to really see. You can see that he just took this upon himself to adhere himself to Luka and be like, I'm gonna lead the way. And Luka deferring the leadership part, not necessarily on the court. They find their moments for them both to shine. But Luka was like, I want and need a guy like Kyrie here. And Kyrie having, sometimes it's seasons. It's a maturation process. And for him, this moment and this situation just clicked for him, where he's like, he's got his kid. He feels really comfortable with the organization. I give a lot of credit to Mark Cuban, just, developing a situation where guys like to come play. Dallas isn't known for getting big free agents, but it's a place where players always feel like they think that the organization cares about them. And we're seeing that play out now, where Kyrie, he's not only mentoring Luka, he's mentoring the rest of these young guys about moments and taking advantage of these opportunities, because they don't come around very often. So it's been a complete 180 from the Kyrie we've gotten to know. He kind of got a bad rap for a lot of the stuff he did. I don't think he did a whole lot of stuff that was, they tried to assassinate his character a little bit. Now, mistakes, you have to atone for those. And some of the stuff I don't think was in his best interest. And it was very tone deaf in a lot of ways. But you don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. People really tried to kind of completely paint him with a very broad brush. And as we know, Kyrie is a very nuanced, complex person, sage included. So it's been a good situation regardless.
But stick there for a second, because you've been in so many locker rooms. Kyrie's not a spring chicken, right? Like he's a player that's been around for a minute. How rare is it in your experience to see somebody later in their career that is able to suddenly change, not necessarily change some of their, the balloon's going apparently, change their approach. I don't know what gets balloons. I want to figure out how to get balloons.
Celebrate.
Look at that. How rare is it for somebody to sort of change that part of them that late in their career?
Well, you got to think about Kyrie's journey. So he was a first round pick, and he was drafted in Cleveland to be the guy. And, for a while there, he didn't have a ton of help. And it's rare for a guy his size to really drag an organization to the top. So what comes is LeBron returns the prodigal son back to Cleveland, and then them two together, they get to the mountaintop. And so for him, the next stop being Boston, there was another young duo, and then you could even argue a trio. And then the choice to then go to Brooklyn and kind of go back on what his word to Boston, but then to be a part of a trio. Kyrie has always tried to figure out where his role is. It's not like top dog, the guy. It's in concert with another guy. And sometimes he is the 1A option. Sometimes he's the 1B option. And he has figured out that he can be 1A and 1B in this Lucas situation, and he's okay with it. And I think everyone else is okay with him being that. There isn't an expectation for him to be the one guy all the time. And so the situation here feels clearer for him, I think, than it's ever felt in his entire career.
Yeah, I do think finding that comfort in your role is something that can take guys a while. And Kyrie, I remember I went back when this subject came up the other day and rewatched the interview from when he was in Boston, where he said, I called Bron and apologized to him because I didn't understand everything that came with trying to lead in the front of the pack in this way. And he even said, there are only a handful of guys walking this earth that are capable of going out and doing those things consistently that can lead a group. And I remember that becoming such a big part of his growth and that trip to Boston and learning how difficult it is to be the one out in front the way he had tried to early in his career in Cleveland. And so it's not surprising to me that a player going along who's had all the experiences that Kyrie's had now, to your point about being a full, very three-dimensional person, Kyrie's had a lot of experiences and I'm sure had a lot of feedback come his way. And he seems to have made the best out of that, at least from what we've seen in the basketball sense for a while here now. Marshall Newhouse, for anyone unaware, a guy that played over a decade in the NFL, won a Super Bowl along the way, and is one of the smartest guys I've talked to around this, no surprise, being an offensive lineman. And so, Marshall, I wanted to get your opinion because I saw this change the other day come up potentially in the NFL's offseason program, where we saw reports that the NFLPA wanted to change some of the structure of the offseason as conversations around the NFL and the owners wanted to continue to add games to the regular season and essentially take the organized team activities, the spring workouts for anyone unfamiliar with the structure that go on now for NFL teams leading up to the draft and then after the draft until about the middle or end of June, and instead eliminate those in favor of adding on more time to NFL training camp before the season, essentially elongating guys' time away from the building. As someone went through a decade of these offseason programs, a decade plus of training camps, when you see this kind of headline, is this something that you look at and go, okay, this is a net positive for players?
It's hard to say because, I think there's two camps in our roster that benefit in different ways from all the things involved in the offseason. So young guys, I think, need as much opportunity with coaches, with their teammates, with some instruction, because you truly are figuring things out. I got drafted, I was still 21 years old. As much as I thought I was mature, being a pro is a whole other thing that you have to learn how to do. And so those off-season days were just really an acclimation period. And so I think I needed a lot of that, from the mini camp to the learning what OTAs and like the schedule and how you prepare, because in essence, those are little training camps. You're doing installs, you're figuring out the cadence of the day and how you take care of your body, even though you're only in helmets. So for some guys that need that, but when I got drafted by Green Bay, we had, I think, less than 5 vets, but a handful of guys who just didn't even show up. That was a different time. That was 2 CBAs ago. And so I think there's a lot of people that, that extra time is not needed, A, because you get to spend that time with your family that you lose during the season, and B, guys who you can trust or who've been there before, their bodies are something they figured out what's best for them. And so those extra hours at the facility don't add a whole lot to their output or their performance. Now, it's a comfort thing for coaches. They love having guys around. They wish we would never leave to a certain degree, but that's just not conducive to a healthy mental relationship with the game of football. And so if you take some of these OTAs away, which if people don't know, it's a 9-week program. It's just a ramp up into practices and then a ramp up into a mandatory minicamp at the end. Most of those veteran guys don't need all of that. And so again, from a mental health standpoint, that extra time with wife and kids is crucial, because we know what we're sacrificing in the fall. You're giving up the baseball games and the dropping the kids off at school, and getting all of that time, to me, then adds to their cup, so that, you can't pour from an empty cup, as we say. We've been around people who understand what that means. And so adding that to training camp, I think is an okay thing for veterans. They'd be happy to do that. Now, if we're talking the days of 2 days, maybe not. That's a whole other story of the actual wear and tear and the scheduling. But taking some of those OTAs and shifting them to closer to the season makes a lot more sense, especially if you're going to add demands of potential adding another regular season game. So, and then you're taking away, as the years goes on, another preseason game. So it's all kind of in concert, and it all depends on where you're at in your career.
But isn't that one of, Marshall, the hardest things that the NFLPA has to deal with? You've got thousands of players that some of them are going to play for a long time. Some of them are only going to be in the league for a few years. Some of them are young and need the reps. Some of them been around forever and don't. You've got one group that is collectively bargaining for a group of people whose needs are all so wildly different. I think it just becomes, because I hear you on that, but I also fear for the undrafted rookie that's trying to make a roster, that how the hell is he going to do that when now all of a sudden this ramp up time puts him so close to it? So I'm not sure, while it feels like that helps, even if they tried to implement a system, for example, where they let younger players come into OTAs, well, that only lets coaches get more familiarity with younger players, which pushes out fringe guys that have been around the league for a few years. So it feels like the players are sort of in a no-win situation sometimes, because you can't help all of them at once, right?
Jason, welcome to a union, brother. It's no one's needs are all met. And so this is the things we talk about in the locker room of what would each guy prefer? And it varies wildly. And so I think, generally trying to atone and help players for their longevity and taking care of their bodies is always a good thing. Their mental health is always a good thing. But there won't be a perfect solution that everyone agrees with. But we have player reps, and that is kind of, on the back end, some people just won't get what the best thing that they need. I was a guy who later on my career, I would sign later. I would sign in June. I would sign right before camp, or I would sign after camp. And so I just kind of took that as part of it. And, the whole point of being a professional is that eventually you figure out what you need and what you understand is required of you to be ready. So if you show up, and because you haven't had the structure of an OTA, but somehow that means you're not ready to go when a team needs you, that is incumbent on you on being professional. I signed with the New England Patriots in 2019 in week 3, and signed on a Wednesday morning and started on a Sunday at right tackle. That is required of you sometimes. It is not easy. It is very, very difficult, but that is the whole professional part. People could trust in me. People being Bill Belichick trusted me enough to be ready enough that I, from my experience and from my days of being playing in other situations, and that is sometimes what is asked for you, and it's not easy, and that's why they cut you the checks at the end of the day. So no one is going to be super happy. I do believe in investing in the development of players, but again, once you get to this professional level, there is a level of expectation of how you carry yourself, and it's incumbent on you to find an OG when you get there. Hey, how do I do this? Teach me your ways. Let me be in your pocket. Let me be a barnacle, because you're going to get left behind if you don't.
Mike, I only point that out because I think it's huge for the age. I only point that out because when we get into this conversation about an 18-game schedule, this is just part of the beast of it. There are 32 owners that all want one thing, right? They want more football, more money. There are thousands of players that all need different things. So it feels like one side is fighting this battle with one arm tied behind their back, which is going to be huge when we go to 18, Mike. That was my tie into all of that.
Yeah, no, and listen, it's always a worthwhile point to remind people that when everyone tries to simplify or take the PA to task in public because they think this is such an easy job, you're doing that with all of this disparity amongst the working population of the PA. And, oh, by the way, one of the few leagues that has to negotiate with their own personal health and safety in mind, because this sport and its collision basis is a lot different than almost everything else, this side of hockey. I guess the only other league that's probably got to do that in the same way. Marshall, this is totally out of left field, but you just mentioned Bill Belichick there, and it made me realize we hadn't had you on post Tom Brady roast here. Is that the version of Bill that you guys saw in the locker room? Like, if Patriots been holding out on us for all this time and Bill was actually this loose, nice guy behind closed doors in New England that we never saw at the podium?
Man, let's not go that far. He wasn't this loose, happy-go-lucky guy. But, yeah, I mean, he would have real, just human conversations with you. I remember when I signed, we talked about he knew that my cousin Robert played for the Cowboys, and he wanted to talk about that. He wanted to talk about he knew where I grew up. He knew where I played college. He's a football guy, and yeah, can have a normal conversation. And even there's another side of him that will crack jokes, and he had this wry sense of humor. And so to see it on that stage was wild. You know, with shots flowing and comedians roasting. That is the last place I ever thought he'd be. But it was fun to see him kind of engage in that way and kind of take a little bit of a lighthearted approach, you know, that most people haven't seen. The mumbling 2-word answer Bill Belichick from the press conferences was never him. That was just literally in his mind. He's like, there is no good that can come of this strategically for football. I can only give away information. I can't gain anything from this. Why would I give any more? I'm going to do the bare minimum. But yeah, behind the scenes, he's still a football guy. He loves the players, despite, you know, all the stuff with transactions and things like that. That's just the reality of football. But yeah, that was fun to see. I have high secondhand embarrassment, so that entire thing was cringy for me to watch. I couldn't imagine ever doing that. So God bless Tom and God bless everyone up there on stage. But yeah, it was fun to see Bill kind of cut loose.
Do you think Bill coaches again?
I do. He's got it in his blood. I think someone will have a situation again. It's going to be a very specific someone in a very specific situation. I've seen a lot of conspiracy theories about where that will be. I won't conjecture about that. But I do think he'll coach again. He's just got too much to give to the game. He doesn't belong yet on, I think he's signed with McAfee or the Manning podcast. That's cool. He doesn't belong there yet. We need more Bill Belichick scheming, more Bill Belichick trying to win games in the margins, doing all those little things, showing us more about what can be done in a game of football. I believe he will coach again.
Only a couple minutes left here, but then on the other side of that coin, I know you just got done with the NFL's broadcast boot camp, and Tom Brady is getting ready to make that move into the booth. Based on what you know about, you know, working in media now as much as you have and continuing to do more of that, how do you think Tom's going to fare when he gets there?
Listen, I think he'll do well eventually. I think it's going to be a rough start. I was listening to the Pablo Torre Finds Out podcast with Boog. And I agree with Boog a little bit. Like, and I'm still new in this as well, but I've done a couple of games on radio, and it's a whole different beast. And, you know, what we can lean on is that Tom's going to prepare and he's going to be competitive. He's going to try to bring his best foot forward. But he's literally got so much context and knowledge to bring that you've got to, in concert with your play-by-play guy, bring light to that in 7-second bits. And him figuring out how to do that in a way that flows over a 3 to 4 hour broadcast is not something that anyone can just do off the street, even the GOAT in football. So he's got a lot of knowledge to bring, but it is not a shoo-in that he's just going to be great out of the gate. What we all want to know is just, we're all going to tune in just to hear Tom Brady assess a game. He's going to assess that first game, Dak Prescott. He's going to assess Deshaun Watson, the defenses, how that matchup goes. And we're going to love that. But there will be, from a technical producing standpoint, you guys are in the business, there will be things that you'll pick up like, oh, you know, he's going to stumble a little bit. Things won't be perfectly smooth. I think that's okay. He's allowed a little grace. Even with the money, he's allowed a little grace. I'd love to have that much money and grace as well. But listen, I think he'll be great for the game. And if he puts what we know Tom Brady can put into something like that, he'll eventually be very good at it. And he'll be worth, you know, the watch. Absolutely.
And worth the watch and worth the $375 million that we keep alluding to. Dear God here. You know what? Somebody out there, Marshall Newhouse, who's kind enough to join us today, pay Marshall Newhouse large sums of money to come and talk very smartly about sports the way he did for us today. Marshall, we appreciate the time as always, brother.
Thank you, brother.
Appreciate y'all. Thank you.
Incredible. You know what? While we're at it, I mean, pay us too that much money.
I'll take one. I'll take one
along the way.
While you just cut checks, I mean, you know.
GoJo and Golic. The SEC meets this week for its annual spring meetings, and lawsuits are sort of the topic of conversation. Florida head coach Billy Napier staying quiet on the Jalen Rashida lawsuit. SEC Commissioner Greg Sankey says he's not a fan of lawsuits, which isn't too surprising. I don't think many people are. He talked about this when talking about the state of the SEC and what college sports could look like after the NCAA settled 3 antitrust cases. GoJo, usually the guy we go to on this to break it down, what those lawsuits actually and those cases were all about, and the fact that Greg Sankey says he's not a fan of it, again, not a surprise.
No, not a surprise here, but the flavor of the day. And Fitz, this is an interesting time overall at these SEC meetings because we're going to get to, we're hearing Steve Sarkisian now talk about being a member of the Southeastern Conference along with his running mates and rivals at Oklahoma, and all these changes that's going to come on the field in introducing these huge brands there. But we've also got the backdrop of the ever-changing landscape of college sports with all this stuff going on right now. We've got Greg Sankey, who came out the other day and ticked everybody off by coming out and saying, I've not had a student athlete come to me and say, I want to be taxed like an employee, as that fallout from the House versus NCAA lawsuit settlement continues to be at the forefront here. And Fitz, I think looking at this, it was interesting to me because Greg Sankey is someone who understands the role his voice plays in shaping this sport as well or better than anybody. He's one of the few remaining real movers at the helm of these conferences now that we've had so many of the other heads of these major conferences like the Big Ten leave and be replaced. Notre Dame athletic director Jack Swarbrick on the way out as well. For Greg Sankey to come out here and strike this tone that continues to defy what we all see in front of us, that athletes are absolutely employees in whatever form or fashion, whatever tax number you want to associate with them, the fact that he's still resistant to this says that the fight, in my mind, is not really over on what athletes and what players are going to have to push for in the coming months on this front.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because he says he would welcome a national standard. And I would remind everybody the NCAA could have done that if they'd have gotten ahead on any of this years ago. They didn't. So now those standards are going to be set in court. That's partially because people like Greg Sankey didn't do anything with the platform. They had to actually get ahead of the problem. But above and beyond that, let me just say this quickly, Mike, about taxes. Nobody in the world will care about this unless they think about this moment up. All right. When I was touring in music, I had to pay taxes in every single state that we played shows in. And if you play in Canada and you make over $10,000, you have to pay taxes in Canada. You also have to pay taxes, European tours that you do. You have to pay taxes on every studio session that you do. So at the end of the year, when I would get my tax forms, no exaggeration, there would be hundreds of forms. And you know what I did with those hundreds of forms? I walked them into somebody and I set them down on his desk and I said, help me. But nobody, when I was 18 years old, starting in music, ever turned around and said, wait. Can't let you be a musician, man. You're going to have to pay taxes on it. Like, this doesn't exist in any other industry. Nobody's sitting around saying, you know what? Macaulay Culkin really shouldn't get an acting gig as his kid because he's going to have to pay taxes on that movie. Like, this is such ignorance from Greg Sankey continually talking about these sorts of issues. Like, we're not smart enough as a society to look at it and say, guess what? Kids right now that are earning on YouTube are paying taxes. Influencers that are earning on Instagram are paying taxes. Your athletes are going to have to pay taxes too. That's just part of life. But when you make a bunch of money, Greg, you can hire somebody that will help you with your taxes. Like, these kids are not being put out on an island where they can't afford $500 to get somebody to help them with their taxes if they need it, Mike. So it shows that Greg Sankey's not really into any true solutions. He's just in to do old man yelling on the lawn at the sky in some way that doesn't actually affect any change for college football.
Well, I disagree on the last part just because Greg knows his voice, again, carries weight. And Greg's a smart enough man to know that, yes, obviously it's actually not that prohibitive. Like, everyone hates paying taxes, but everyone likes being paid money a lot more. It's like my dad always says about having an agent. Paying 10% off something is a lot better than 0% of nothing if there's nothing coming in. And for these college players who will now finally have to be paid by the school, which I don't think is a small thing. The schools have been able to skirt actual responsibility and an actual chunk out of their ass throughout this process for the last few years. And while they complain about the lack of control they've not had to yet give of themselves in a way that they're going to have to now. And Greg Sankey is making sure that every step along the way, he tries to maintain and regain some of the leverage. That's what this has all been about from the NCAA side or the member institution side is reminding people, hey, we still want to control the way things are going forward. And part of that is, even if we think it's an ill-suited fight against the perception and the way this is framed, because we've all waved bye-bye to this idea that there was some altruism in college sports and an amateurism that was keeping it the way it was. I do think that this is purposeful, even if it doesn't logically make a ton of sense to us.
It's purposeful, but we should be able to see through it. Like, you lost your opportunity to now control the variables when you didn't get ahead of controlling the variables. Again, you and I, when we first started working together on ESPNU at the time in college football, we were talking about some of this, the possibility of these sorts of things all the way back in 2017. If the NCAA in 2017 had put the same effort into establishing guidelines that they're now putting into yelling about the guidelines that don't exist, we wouldn't be in this situation. Once it went to court, then all of a sudden everybody turned around and said, wait, we can control our own destiny. We can actually affect the way that we're going to be treated. Once that toothpaste is out of the tube, it ain't going back in. So now, to me, whatever Greg is saying about what they want to, I'm not a fan of lawsuits. Well, of course you're not. They cost you a bunch of money. But guess what, Greg? You didn't get ahead of it. So now you're going to get sued. You're going to get sued over and over and over again. And as we talked to Marshall earlier about unionization in the NFL, unionizing college football players is going to be wildly difficult and could take a very long time, which means up until then, absolutely every one of these players can just turn around and say, I don't like that rule. I'm going to take you to court. And they will win because they have been winning it every step of the way. So Greg Sankey is fighting a losing battle. He's on the Titanic. It's sinking. And he's still trying to tell you while the string quartet's playing behind him that everything's just fine. Greg, it isn't. Stop pretending it is. That's all I'm saying.
Well, it's going to be fine for them because they're one of the halves. Like, as we get ready to actually spin this forward to the football portion of things, is yes, they've been getting their ass handed to them. Yes, I do think the version of the NCAA and the version of college athletics we're going to get coming on the other side of these lawsuits is probably going to, once again, from what you mentioned, the difficulty of trying to unionize across 130 plus schools with a bunch of players who have a very limited time here and all very wildly different interests. That's going to be a Herculean effort, and I don't know yet if they're up to the task on that. So once again, things rule in favor of the house in here. And then when you're the SEC and the Big Ten, life is going to be a little bit different for you. And ultimately, these schools are going to get some measure of control back. And Jason, the most important thing over the top of what we've seen is the football product has not yet been affected in any sort of meaningful way. And now that you're going to add Texas and Texas A&M back into the same conference now and get a bunch of these teams here. I mean, Texas in its current state, Jason, entering the SEC, the way that they finished off their Big 12 tenure last year, that is huge going into this season for how all of this is perceived, because now they're one of the teams with people coming back with Quinn Ewers and a bunch of the core pieces on this team that have a chance to not just go in here and survive, but kind of go in and try and make the kind of jump that Texas A&M and Missouri did years ago when they left their former conferences and immediately said, oh no, we're here to play in a way most people didn't anticipate.
You're 1,000% right. And I do want to be very clear. The game of college football, I don't think has ever been in a better situation than it is right now. And I think this is set up to be the most exciting season we've ever seen. Playoff expansion and the way that they've taken away the divisions within the Big Ten, for example, it's going to create absolute mass chaos. We are going to have the best of the best and interest late in the year. Mike, you're totally right. Texas can come in and do the impossible, and they better, because we all know, and you know very well, the donors behind Texas are not coming in to finish in 4th, 5th, 6th place year after year after year. They're coming in to make the playoffs, and I think they can in this climate, in this SEC, in this environment.
They can. We'll have plenty of time to preview this season because I do think it's fascinating. We're walking in with a lot fewer brand name players than we did last year. Like, we caught the tail end of that COVID wave of players with extra eligibility, especially the quarterbacks, that gave us some star power, especially out west. It was all over geographically. And now going into this season, as we wait for everything from the portal dust to settle, it's all right. I know Ohio State is going to be very good at football this year. I know Georgia is going to be very good at football next year. And I know a lot of other teams have a chance, Texas among them. But outside of that, we have a lot more finding out to do than we had last year, where we went into one of the better college football seasons in recent memory. All right, welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Jason Fitz, Claudia Bellafato, and now excited to talk some baseball. Speaking of talking baseball, our guy Jake Storiale from Talking Baseball over at John Boy Media. Awesome DraftKings partners in here, and it was so good the first time, Jake, we had to bring you back again. How you doing, brother?
I'm great. I'm excited to be here. And that's not like funny business. Like, I'm excited to yuck it up. I don't have a football question at the end going out today. I'll see if I stumble into something, but I'm excited to see what you guys got about baseball. Cause that's normally we're in like our baseball bubble. So like what's everyone got?
Well, I mean, Jake, I think the funniest thing is that the biggest like national media breakthrough baseball headline had to do with an umpire announcing that he was going to be done. Like the Angel Hernandez victory lap that everybody seems to be taking. And I've always said a general rule of thumb in sport is if you know the official's name, it is generally a bad thing. And so take us inside the actual bubble of baseball here and how bright the celebration has been for you all.
Man, it's gotten so far into the victory lap. It's like, hey, this, he's a human. There's a couple bad baseball calls, but let's tighten it up a little bit. But no, I mean, it's insane. And there's this weird thing, late night Jake starts thinking about things and something with our society that like, I don't know if it's him being poor at his job or maybe it's like relatable at knowing someone who's bad at their job. One of our most watched videos on our Talking Baseball YouTube channel, it's Angel Hernandez. Like people know his name. He's a celebrity and I don't know. There's some weird, like United States Angel Hernandez is bad at his job. And we love that and hate that at the same time. So that's kind of where I've landed.
No, but see, what we're missing here is we now need a new person to just start destroying. So who's the new ump? Like, who do we go after if we can't go after Angel? We can't all be content as a society.
I think it might be a John Boy Media reality show because we lost Joe West. Ooh. Like Joe West was kind of like the king of the court, but he was the perfect ump. Like he was the boss. If you crossed him the wrong way, like you were going to get the horns. Man, we're recruiting right now and we need it. So we're taking applications.
All right, taking applications for that reality show. In the meantime, as we try and replace what we lost in the sports world with Angel Hernandez. And Jake, unfortunately, it seems like the other news this week has been bad that we noticed. Ronald Acuna Jr., unfortunately, suffering that ACL tear, and his season's going to be over. It broke my heart to see him. The first thing he does is go to Twitter and tweet out, "I'm sorry." Like he understands the amount of people that were relying on him for a Braves team that's still, trailing the Phillies, who have been a wagon in the NL East right now. But I mean, just how big is this impact felt for baseball where there's another season now we won't get to see Ronald Acuna Jr.?
It's brutal, man. I mean, we get so lost in numbers and everything that you forget what he did last year and how silly it was. The 73 stolen bases, and that's a number we don't see anymore. He led the league in OPS. So like he was basically the best power hitter, if not the best contact hitter and the fastest guy. So, man, when you see a tweet like that, he's 26 and this is his second ACL tear. So it's brutal for him. And then I think on the Braves side, like they've been a little stagnant this year. And for them, stagnant is 31-21. So they're fine. But they just got Sean Murphy back and Austin Riley back. So it obviously stinks. I think it's going to be interesting to see going back to the Braves team that won it all. They trade for like 4 outfielders at the deadline to supplement that team. I think it's, the dominant Braves. They'll be there in October. Will they win their 5-game or 7-game set? I think the narrative's changed a little bit with that. Ronald's injury and just how good the Phillies are.
Yeah, but I mean, the season's so long, Atlanta can't just punt. So is there something in your mind they can do to actually make up for the loss?
I think you see what's there at the deadline. Like that's kind of the crazy part with baseball and the expanded playoffs right now. It's ridiculous, man. Like if you go look at the wild card standings, it's almost June 1, right? Like summer's here. This is baseball season a little bit as we're finishing up the NBA playoffs and hockey. But like, right now, if the Toronto Blue Jays have an 8-2 week, they'll be buying at the deadline and trying to, fulfill what was supposed to be like a new era of Blue Jays baseball. If the Blue Jays have a 2-8, 10 days coming up, like they're selling, where's Vlad going and Bichette. So that it's the fun part of baseball right now that if you go look at the NL wildcard standings, like a team like the Cardinals, which feel like they've been a disappointment for a year and a half, they're like a game out of the playoffs technically. So there's some baseball purists that gets hurt by that because the regular season is lessened, but it also keeps all these fan bases in it. So in the end of the day, it's good.
Speaking of fan bases in it and some of the big brands around baseball, Jake, I've been a little bit surprised. Obviously, we've had so much of our attention for understandable reasons trained out in Los Angeles with what the Dodgers did this offseason, with the way they started the season with the Shohei stuff, and going out here and seeing so many between Mookie and Shohei both on historic paces in their own right, doing great things so far this season. I've been a little bit surprised at how little fanfare it seems, at least in the outside, for a brand the size of the New York Yankees, where we haven't seen them talked about more nationally for the season they've had so far. You mentioned the Phillies with 38 wins, the Yankees only a game behind in that. So why aren't people talking more about this team that's been one of the traditional brands in baseball for so long?
Dodgers, I was going to say Dodgers are in a weird spot. Dodgers are in the best spot ever. They brought in everyone this offseason. They're the Dodgers. Go look at their baseball reference, just year over year, what they do. They just win the West. And yeah, they've fallen into this weird sports hole of like, sure, they got their title, but it happened to be in the weirdest year in the past, like 300 years of U.S. history. Let's not do 300 years of U.S. history. But no, man, I get so jealous because the thing with baseball fans, we watch our team. So to watch other teams can be tough. Because now you're committing 6 hours of your night to watching baseball, which, okay, that gets me going a little bit, but everyone's got lives and stuff. But when you watch the Dodgers and you see that top of the lineup come up, it's historic. That it's a special thing, but they're getting judged strictly on October. Like their regular season doesn't matter. And again, there's part of me that hurts saying that, but it's just the truth. So I don't know. It's funny talking to Dodger fans. I don't know if you guys have Dodger fans in your life, but you've never seen a group of people so down on like if they win it all, we'll talk about this team as like a historic all-time team. But until they do, Dodger fans are like, I don't know, Dave Roberts. And you're just like, come on.
The fun mirrors the Celtics conversation I keep bringing up. God, it feels so good. Okay, so who's a fraud? This late into like, who do you not believe in?
Oh, now we're cooking. God, what mean tweets do I want to read today? Like I will say who's a fraud. God, let's go. I'll say Seattle, and I already hate it because I glass half full, glass half empty. They haven't hit this year, and they're on top of the AL West. Which again, okay, Julio's starting to hit. If they get contributions from anyone, if they know what they need at the deadline, you can solve that problem pretty quickly, and their pitching is going to be there. The other side of that is I don't know if I believe in their front office to make the move to bring in another hitter that they might need. Houston, the big bad wolf, is lurking. Like the Rangers haven't kicked into gear. That at least one of those teams is going to figure it out. And I think teams can find pitching a lot easier than hitting these days. That if you have the hit tool, which Houston and Texas do have, that's going to happen at some point. And if you're not, that's how you end up in losing streaks. So mean tweets from the Pacific Northwest this morning.
I guess, you know what? You handled that as diplomatically as anyone could after Jason just lobbed the grenade into your lap. So Jake doing the Lord's work there. You guys could check that out on Talking Baseball over at John Boy Media. Jake doing awesome stuff as always. Brother, we appreciate the time. I'm sorry Fitz did that to you.
Thank you, bud.
Hey, appreciate it, guys. We'll see you soon.
Absolutely. All right, coming up next. Top 5 zoo animals. Not something that I had on the docket here, and NBA stars keeping receipts. We'll get to all of it as we wrap things up here on GoJo and Golic. All right, time to finish things off the way we always do, folks. This, that, the third. 3 quick stories to send you into the rest of the day. As always, make sure you download, subscribe, rate, review us. Leave us a 5-star rating and check us out here live Monday through Friday from 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern on the DraftKings Network. If you miss any of that, you can check out the best of GoJo and Golic from noon to 1 p.m. Eastern, wherever you hear VSiN on the radio. And if you miss any of that or our great guests, thank you to Jake Storiale from Talking Baseball. Joined us here to talk a little bit about that. Marshall Newhouse, NFL veteran, offensive tackle, former TCU great and Super Bowl champion, for breaking down some changes coming up to the NFL offseason potentially. And of course, Jason Fitz, who you can check out doing great work over at Yahoo Sports, for joining us and sitting in the host chair for the last couple of days as Dad has been on the road. You can check him out at Jason Fitz on Twitter as well. If you missed any of that live, get it wherever you get your podcast or right here on YouTube as soon as we get done. We appreciate you hanging out with us the last couple of days, Fitzy.
No, I appreciate you. I figured like I was just going to keep doing it every day. Like we'll just, see, maybe you take some days off, maybe Senior takes some days off, maybe, I don't know, maybe I just like stay, like the house guest that comes into Airbnb and then just takes over the whole house. That's the plan.
Claudia, you realize what's happened here is Jason Fitz has figured out squatters' rights, and he's just going to squat in the Zoom chat for this show, and he's never going to leave now.
$4, man. The more the merrier. I'm in.
Look, see,
a quad box
Claudia, appreciate. Thank you very much, Claudia. I appreciate that. You know what?
Got you.
All right, you know what? You know what I appreciate? Not that, but this. And let's start off with this. We all know that sports players have long memories, especially when it comes to the people that have slighted them over the years. And Victor Wembanyama really took that to the extremes. One of the most heralded rookies in recent NBA history decided to go back to a 3.5-year-old post on Instagram and respond now to someone who 187 weeks ago commented he's not going to do none of that in the NBA relative to his prospects coming out of France. And then 3 days ago commented, why not? Which, Jason, where are you at on coming in with a softball comment like that? I feel like after all of that time and with all of the accolades that Victor Wembanyama is walking out of year one with, like maybe a couple of trophy emojis or something to signify that you've gone out here and made yourself into the rookie of the year and an all-NBA defensive performer and all these great things.
I mean, I love it. Look, I'm all in on, like, if somebody wants to continually throw their shade, like you're allowed to keep some receipts, right? And go back, because certainly if that person who tweeted that or X'd that or whatever we're supposed to say, that person, if he was right, if Wemby came in and just sucked, that person would have quote tweeted his own tweet and put it out there. It's like, I told you all this 5 years ago. Like, he would have done that. So why not give the player the agency to go back and do that? I'm all in for it. The only other thing that needs to happen is we need to eliminate anonymity in all social media so that he could actually talk directly to the person, but one step at a time.
The question is, though, did he go search his name and try and find some heat so that he could answer it? Like, where did he randomly find this old tweet?
I don't Google myself, but I know many people that do. Like, I don't need that heat. Like, the last thing I'm ever going to do is go to Reddit and find out what the world actually thinks about me. Like, I'm not thick-skinned enough.
Reddit
but there
is
are
a
plenty
scary
of people
place.
that do.
I've done it. It's a scary place.
Oh,
don't do it.
See, that's the one thing. Like, I'm obviously terminally online like everybody else. And like most people, athlete or otherwise, if you live your life or your profession publicly, you are conditioned because of the way humans are wired to focus more on the negatives that pop up than the positives. It can be 90% positive, and it usually is, but that 10% negative is going to bite, especially if it hits on an insecurity. But with athletes, that's tenfold. So, Claudia, I'm sure that this is something he saw in real time and something he just kind of filed away for a rainy day here because guys are sick like that. And we've seen Victor Wembanyama, peak athlete in a lot of ways, has the kind of killer instinct and mentality that most people are ready to hitch their wagon to. And part of that comes a little bit of the sicko internet brain for kids that are raised in this generation. So I kind of love it. I wish he'd even barbed a little bit harder, but you know what? He's a better man than me, and that's why he's going to probably go on and become one of the all-time greats that we're getting ready to see. Speaking of all-time great news, Claudia, let's get to that here. Panda Watch, from a movie that you probably also haven't seen, or at least the entirety of, coming back to our nation's capital.
Nope, never even saw a minute of it. I'm not going to lie there. I'm done lying about movies that I really just haven't seen the majority of them. But pandas are coming to the National Zoo, and the First Lady made the announcement. There's a nice little video that they put out, very well put together. I don't know why this is such a big deal, but I guess pandas are cool, right, Fitzy? Are they a top 5 animal? Are you going to the zoo to see a panda?
No. Like, look, I'm just not, and I'm an animal lover. I love the opportunity to see weird animals in different places too. But I don't know, like, am I taking a special trip for a panda? If I could like cuddle with a panda, maybe. But if I'm just going to see a panda through the other side of a glass or fence, like, that's not my thing. Like, if you told me the panda was on the ground and I could big spoon a panda, I'm in. If you tell me that I have to look at a panda from a distance, I'm not in.
Reddit's going to go wild with that one. Reddit's going to go wild with that.
I can be big. I'm a little guy, but I can still be big spoon every once in a while. Come on. Like, I don't want the panda to big spoon me. Like, the panda's a lot stronger than I am. I don't want the panda to get the wrong impression. I just want to big spoon the panda so I have a big cuddly teddy bear.
I will say there is, I think, a general fascination, especially for those of us. Jason Fitz is a fellow dog lover. And so anyone that's ever had a great cuddly dog that they enjoy being around with, I think has wondered looking at large bears, like seeing a Kodiak grizzly bear or seeing a polar bear. Like, man, how fun would it be to get to cuddle and give little scritchums to something that's that big and powerful?
Dude, if I could get like a big old teddy bear hug to a grizzly bear, I would. I don't know how they make that happen. Like, somebody needs to domesticize one just so I can like actually get to the point where I don't know.
Domesticize.
Domesticate. You said sports player earlier. Instead of athlete, you said sport player. Okay. So I don't even want to hear it from you.
God, we are so painfully stupid around here sometimes. Claudia, you've never fantasized about getting to cuddle with a gigantic bear?
No, you guys are so weird. This is the weirdest thing.
Mike's also,
you know what?
Mike's also a large, hairy man. So maybe this is just like him manifesting something. I don't know.
You know what? At GoJo and Golic on Twitter, have you ever thought about getting to cuddle with a live bear? At GoJo and Golic. I need to know the answer from people because I think more people are on our side, Jason, than would be on Claudia's side here. What doesn't look inviting about a gigantic furry, we're talking about thousands of pounds here. It's like the stress blankets that people have on steroids. It's incredible.
Look, when I was a kid, when I was doing my chores, I used to sing the Bare Necessities, like the Baloo song from Jungle Book, while I dance around like Baloo. I want to hug Baloo. That's a life. I want to hug Baloo. That's it.
So this is a childhood thing. Okay, this is cute now. At first it was getting creepy, but now it's cute. I accept it.
Look, there's no world where big spooning a panda is creepy. Okay, I don't care what you say.
The way it sounds.
I was gonna say, God, Jason, the way you say stuff just makes it sound creepy. Like, you take this idea that I've liked and you make me question my stance on it because you're aligned with me. That being said, guys, let's get away from Fitz's weird cuddling fantasies and get to the third here. So this is interesting. In a day and age of alternative leagues, the Kings League, which launched in 2023 as an alternative European football league, soccer league for those of you playing at home here, started by Gerard Piqué, is now getting a massive investment, 60 million euros, to continue its expansion here. This is a league that, for anyone unfamiliar, has gone to 7-on-7 matches instead of 11-on-11. The match times are shorter, 40 minutes versus 90 minutes. And instead of streaming on television channels the way we've seen leagues like Live Golf struggle with, that have also attempted to shorten and lighten the sports a little bit, they've gone full streaming. It's getting millions and millions of viewers on platforms like Twitch, TikTok, YouTube, etc., trying to make this game. Where are you at overall, Fitz, on the idea of these alternative leagues, the big three in basketball, continuing to try and forge a place in sports?
Look, I think they have an audience. They just don't have a massive audience. And if we just stopped comparing every league to the NFL or to the NBA or major sports in their audience and just looked and said, okay, is that going to get more views than, in a TV example, is that going to get more views than a repeat of Judge Judy? If the answer is yes, then pop it on and people are going to watch it, right? So I think that if you manage the expectation, there's a home for all of this. Look at the UFL right now. Like, is everybody watching it? No, but people that like it, like it.
I do enjoy them finding a lane elsewhere, because trying to break in with ideas like that in traditional broadcast media, pretty difficult. But saying, hey, we're just going to have young people watch us in a place where most of the rest of you adults are never going to find or hear about it, we'll live comfortably with that, and we'll try and keep it moving. We'll also hopefully live comfortably with the idea of Fitz cuddling a panda bear making its way onto Reddit. If that makes you uncomfortable or not, download, subscribe, rate, and review this show. Leave it a 5-star rating, and check us out here live Monday through Friday from 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern. Thanks so much. We'll
Some
talk to you
places
guys
you're
tomorrow.
a bear.